The rain fell in soft sheets, blurring the edges of the world outside the window. Inside, the house was quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. Max, a golden retriever with fur the color of autumn leaves, lay on his favorite rug by the fireplace. His breathing was shallow, his once bright eyes now clouded with age. He was old, too old it seemed for the vibrant world he had once known. But even now, as his body betrayed him, his spirit remained unbroken. Max had been with the Thompson family for 12 years. He had been a puppy when they brought him home, a ball of energy with a wagging tail and a heart full of love. Over the years, he had become more than just a pet. He was a confidant, a protector, and a silent witness to the joys and sorrows of the family. He had seen birthdays, holidays, and quiet evenings. He had comforted Sarah Thompson when she lost her father, and he had been there to greet her newborn son, Liam, with a gentle lick on the cheek. But now, as the rain tapped against the window, Max knew his time was running out. He could feel it in his bones, in the way his legs struggled to carry him, in the way his breath came in shallow gasps. He didn't fear death. Dogs rarely do, but he feared leaving them. He feared the silence that would follow, the empty space where he once lay. It started with small things. Max no longer bounded to the door when Sarah came home from work. He no longer chased the ball Liam threw for him in the backyard. Instead, he spent his days lying in the sun, watching the world go by. Sarah noticed the change, of course. She had always been attuned to Max's needs, and she could see the pain in his eyes. "Mark, he's just getting old, it's natural." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She had always believed that Max was more than just a dog. He was a part of their family, a silent guardian who had been there through it all. And now, as she watched him struggle to stand, she felt a pang of guilt. Had she done enough for him? Had she loved him as much as he had loved her? That night, as the family slept, Max lay awake. His body ached, but his mind was clear. He thought of the day Sarah had brought him home, how she had held him in her arms and whispered, "You're going to be so loved." He thought of the walks in the park, the games of fetch, the nights spent curled up at her feet. He thought of Liam, who had grown from a tiny baby to a curious toddler, always eager to share his snacks with Max. And then, as the clock struck midnight, Max made a decision. He would not let them see him suffer. He would not let them remember him as weak and broken. He would say goodbye in his own way, silently and with dignity. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Max's bed empty. Panic surged through her as she called his name, her voice echoing through the house. She searched every room, every corner, but there was no sign of him. "Sarah! Mark! Max is gone!" Mark rushed downstairs, Liam trailing behind him. Together they searched the backyard, the neighborhood, and the nearby park. But Max was nowhere to be found. As the hours passed, Sarah's panic turned to despair. She couldn't bear the thought of losing him, not like this. Not without saying goodbye. Meanwhile, Max was on a journey of his own. He had slipped out of the house in the early hours of the morning, his old legs carrying him farther than they had in years. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to keep moving. The world outside was different from what he remembered. The streets were quieter, the air colder, but Max pressed on, driven by a force he couldn't explain. He passed familiar landmarks, the park where he had played as a puppy, the bakery where Sarah always bought him a treat, the vet's office where he had been so many times before. As he walked, memories flooded his mind. He remembered the day Sarah had brought Liam home from the hospital, how he had sniffed the tiny bundle in her arms and instantly known that this was someone he needed to protect. He remembered the time he had chased a squirrel up a tree and gotten stuck, how Sarah had laughed as she helped him down. He remembered the nights he had spent lying by her side, his head resting on her lap as she stroked his fur. But with the memories came pain. His legs ached, his breath came in ragged gasps, and his vision blurred. Still, he kept going. He had to. By the time Sarah found him, Max was lying in a patch of grass by the river. His fur was matted, his body trembling with exhaustion. But when he saw her, his tail wagged weakly, and a spark of life returned to his eyes. "Sarah! Max!" Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she stroked his fur. "Sarah, oh Max, why did you leave us?" Max looked up at her, his eyes filled with love and sorrow. He wanted to tell her that he had left because he loved her, because he didn't want her to see him suffer. He wanted to tell her that he would always be with her, even when he was gone, but he couldn't. All he could do was look at her, his silent goodbye speaking volumes. Sarah held him close, her tears falling onto his fur. She knew this was the end, but she also knew that Max had given her everything he had. He had been her friend, her protector, her family, and now, as she held him in her arms, she realized that he would always be a part of her. Max took his last breath as the sun set over the river, his body finally at rest. Sarah stayed with him, her heart breaking but also filled with gratitude. She knew that Max had lived a life full of love, and she knew that he had left this world on his own terms. As she walked home, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink, Sarah felt a sense of peace. Max was gone, but his memory would live on. He had been more than just a dog. He had been a part of her soul. And as she looked up at the stars that night, she knew that Max was watching over her, his silent goodbye, a promise that he would always be with her. Years later, Liam would ask about Max. He would want to know why they didn't have a dog anymore, why the house felt so empty. And Sarah would tell him the story of a golden retriever who had loved them with all his heart, who had been their silent guardian and their faithful friend. She would tell him about the day Max had left, about the journey he had taken, and the silent goodbye he had given. And she would tell him that Max had taught her the true meaning of love, unconditional, unwavering, and eternal. Because in the end, that's what Max had been. Not just a dog, but a reminder that love, in its purest form, is silent. It doesn't need words to be felt, it just is. And as Liam listened, his eyes wide with wonder, Sarah knew that Max's legacy would live on, in their hearts, in their memories, and in the love they shared. Through his eyes, they had seen the world in a different light, and through his silent goodbye, they had learned that love never truly dies. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more emotional and heartfelt tales like this one. Give this video a thumbs up if you believe in the power of love and loyalty, and share it with someone who needs a reminder of the beauty of unconditional love. Want more stories like this? Drop a comment below and let us know what kind of stories resonate with you. Your feedback helps us create content that speaks to your heart. Thank you for being part of our community. Until next time, remember, love is silent, but its impact is everlasting.